Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Linux and open source news show. This week we've got Firefox adding an opt-out ad-related feature, and this created a bunch of controversy, so we're gonna talk about that. We also have some hilarity around the CrowdStrike problem, as CrowdStrike the company and Microsoft both made pretty weird gestures and or statements related to all of this thing. We also have SecureBoot being completely insecure on more than 200 model lines from major manufacturers. We've got AI stealing content from YouTube and pirated movies, and a lot of other things. And we also have this segue to our sponsor. If you have ever read an article online and wondered who exactly was behind that website, if they had a specific bias or agenda, then boy do I have a good service for you. It is Ground News. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code that should appear somewhere on screen to follow along while I tell you how things work. To explain, let's take a look at this story on Google's carbon emissions rising due to their focus on AI. With Ground News, I can be up to speed on this story in seconds, with their summaries and a bias comparison showing me what the left, what the center, and what the right are focusing their reporting on for this specific story. This is based on more than 90 articles here that Ground News found covering this exact story, coming from across the world and across the political spectrum. For example, there's this article from the Inquirer. Ground News shows me their reporting is somewhat credible, it leans politically left, and they are based in the Philippines. I can either read their coverage or keep scrolling for a different perspective on this story. Or I can look at the visual breakdowns on the right for quick data on all the news sources covering this. I really think Ground News is a fantastic service for you to improve your understanding of various issues and various stories, and also to understand what's your echo chamber and to try and escape it. So click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to go to the Ground News website and to get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I use to get all my news. So let's start with something I didn't discuss with the release of Firefox 1.28, because I'll be honest, I completely missed it at that time, and when I learned about it, it felt like it looked pretty harmless. But there's some kind of controversy brewing. Mozilla added and enabled what they call privacy-preserving attribution to Firefox. This is something that is turned on by default for every Firefox user starting with Firefox 1.28. And Mozilla just did not communicate about it in any legible way in the application itself. Basically, they just didn't talk about it. And what it is an experimental feature that collects and aggregates user data to track the performance of ads on websites. So how the thing works is you visit a website that displays ad. This website will ask Firefox to log an impression of this ad. So it just says, yes, this browser watched this ad. And if you click on this ad and land on the destination website that the ad is referring to, and you convert, a conversion could be anything from displaying a phone number, filling in a form, buying a product, or whatever else the website wants to track, then this website will ask Firefox to log that as well and to send them a report. Firefox will not send this data, or any personal data for that matter, to the destination website. Instead, they will send it to an aggregation service that will compile data relevant to this type of ad, this ad campaign, the source you came from, what you did on the website, and they will send this report to the destination website that ran the ad and that got the conversion. So the problem is not really with the technology itself. It looks pretty innocuous in my opinion. The problem is that this has been added by default as an opt-out. And this means that every single user will have this thing enabled without having their say-so. It's not a problem, anyone can disable it, but you need to know that this thing exists to disable it if you're uncomfortable with this technology. And since Mozilla did not really communicate anything about this to any of their users, not even through a little pop-up at first start of this new version to ask people whether they wanted to turn this on, because Mozilla's CTO said that they think pop-ups are user-hostile distractions, then basically if you never read any form of tech news or watched a video or I don't know, listen to a podcast, you didn't even know that this feature existed. Now, personally, I did not even know that this thing existed until I happened upon an article talking about it, and then I did a bit more research to actually learn what it was and what the technology behind it was. And that technology is not the problem. It could actually be good because it could let the ad-based web continue, which, like it or not, is the only way you're getting all of those free videos, articles, podcasts, and everything else. The problem is Mozilla really needs to communicate better about these things, and saying that pop-ups are user hostile when you're shipping a turned on by default opt-out ad-related feature is pretty ironic, because one could say that it's your behavior that is user hostile, Mozilla. Now, the CrowdStrike saga didn't end last week because, hilariously, Microsoft blamed the European Union for their own inability to better secure Windows against the recent CrowdStrike problem. Microsoft said that a decision in the EU from 2009 forces them to open the APIs to the Windows client and server operating systems to third-party devs, and as such, they can't control what third-party apps are doing, which, if you know anything about development, you know it's complete BS. Just because this API or access has to be open doesn't mean it has to be insecure, and it also doesn't mean that your operating system cannot recover better from crashes or blue screens of death. This is all entirely on Microsoft. The EU ruling just said that third-party devs should have the same level of access as what Microsoft gives themselves, which is absolutely normal because Windows built a monopoly on the desktop, and they can't be left with an unfair advantage compared to their potential competitors, because if not, everyone buys solutions from Microsoft because they have better tools. The fact that this access is handled so badly by Windows is a Windows problem, not a regulation problem. And just after making this hilarious statement, Microsoft is saying the exact opposite officially, because they have published in a blog post their intent to develop further a few features that they already have, like VBS enclaves that provide an isolated environment that lets you make sure your application isn't tampered with and doesn't need kernel access, or the Azure Attestation Service, which lets you check if the binaries running have been compromised. Both features aim to remove the need for the kernel access that apps can get on Windows, but to still provide the same kind of functionality. Which means that they know they can, and they already have, taken some steps to limit this kernel access by providing APIs that they can access and third-party apps can access, making their first statement completely irrelevant and basically completely false. But this doesn't stop here either, because the company responsible for millions of Windows PCs crashing, namely CrowdStrike, decided that the best way to rebuild consumer trust was to send affected companies a $10 Uber Eats gift card. I thought this was a joke at first, something out of The Onion, but no, it's been confirmed by a CrowdStrike spokesperson. To add insult to injury, Uber Eats thought the activity around these cards was suspicious, and as such revoked a bunch of them, meaning some people couldn't even redeem that paltry gift. And the only potential reason I can see why any sane person would greenlight this kind of Uber Eats gift card program is if they really thought that accepting this gift card would count as compensation for the damages received and as such would prevent you from suing CrowdStrike. I don't think that's how it works, but I don't think there's any other reason why any person would say, yeah, that's a good idea. Now, less fun news, because SecureBoot is apparently completely broken on more than 200 models of devices sold by major hardware vendors like Dell, Acer, Gigabyte, Intel, and Supermicro. The issue is apparently a cryptographic key that was compromised in 2022. And this key is what makes SecureBoot secure, in theory, on these devices. It is the usual someone forgot to remove the private key from a commit to a public GitHub repo, so everyone who wanted could access the private key. It was protected by a password, but it was a 4-character password, meaning it was incredibly easy to crack, and so the key was basically free for any malicious actor. The problem is made worse by the fact that some other manufacturers, and the manufacturers we already mentioned, actually shipped some devices with testing keys that are public and should not be used in production systems that are sold to consumers. Unfortunately, this still happened for HP, Lenovo, Fujitsu, and the 5 manufacturers I mentioned previously. Now don't worry too much, because to take advantage of this flaw, someone needs to have prior privileged access to your computer, either remotely or physically. They need to be able to install software that is certified by this public key that isn't supposed to be public, so it can be run at the boot level. Now, if you want to check if your computer is affected, the link in the description from Ars Technica has commands you can run on Linux and something you can do on Windows as well to check if that's an issue for you. And obviously, if you are affected, do check for firmware updates from your manufacturer. It's always better to fix this kind of thing if you can. Now, if you were eagerly awaiting the Cosmic Desktop for July, as it was announced the alpha was coming at the end of July, well, you're gonna be disappointed because the alpha has been moved yet again. It had been announced, I think in March, and been pushed to April, then June, then July, and now it's been announced for the 8th of August. Now, the fact that they give an actual date gives me hope that this one is locked in, and I was also invited to a press, YouTuber, blog, whatever, remote event to discuss everything that will be in the alpha and probably what we should focus on for testing and what still needs to be fixed. So this alpha will come also with an alpha of Pop! OS 24.04, and it's the only major update to Pop! OS in 2 years. So that's pretty nice to see. Now, I had already started testing the Cosmic Desktop because I expected to have to make a video about it this week or the next, and what I have found is that it is fine. It's really no different in use than the current version of Cosmic. Bugs aside, because of course it's early days, it's not even an alpha what I tested, it looks solid. It worked well with proprietary NVIDIA drivers, the performance felt fine, it has most of the basic tools and settings that you'd expect, but that's about it. It's nothing fancy, nothing super advanced. They've basically caught up to what they had 2 years ago with a new base that they actually have control over. And don't get me wrong, this is a fantastic achievement. Building something from scratch, even just replicating what you already had in 2 years, is great. But don't expect Cosmic to blow GNOME and KDE out of the water when it comes out with its first stable version. It's not going to do that. It's gonna be at most on par and very likely a bit less efficient with a bit less options because it's a first version. It's still going to be a nice contender in the future, but the first version is not going to just take over the entire Linux desktop. And speaking of desktops, Linux Mint 22 is out. I do already have a dedicated video on the channel, so of course you can watch it if you want all the details. You can already download the ISO and perform the update if you want. I'm not sure if they already offer an upgrade in place from 21.3, but they usually tend to wait a week or two before they propose that to people just to make sure that nothing is horribly broken. Now, the main changes is the move to Cinnamon 6.2, which, apart from letting you reorder the context menu in the file manager, isn't a big change. You also get a sort of downgrade to a lot of apps compared to other distros. You're moving to their latest GTK 3 versions, because Mint cannot theme the latest libadwaita GNOME apps, and so they will very likely fork these older GTK 3 versions in the future to have their own set of apps. They also disabled unverified Flatpaks from FlatHub, meaning you will not see them by default in the software manager. You can re-enable that yourself in the settings, but these unverified apps will not have ratings or user reviews, so you don't know if the packages are actually good or not. It's something I discussed in the video. I think it's a really bad idea, but you'll learn why in the video. You also get a replacement for the IRC client that Mint used to ship, and they're moving to Matrix instead. They're shipping a web app that bundles the Element client. And of course, Mint is now based on Ubuntu 24.04 LTS, so you get newer versions of everything in the repos, a newer kernel, better performance, and newer drivers. I think Mint is still a fantastic option for beginners and also for more advanced users. I think they're doing a great job. The only worry I have is that they're taking on way too much the Cinnamon desktop, the modifications to the Ubuntu base, like maintaining their own versions of deb packages to replace the snaps that Ubuntu tries to push, and now adding almost 10 apps, I think, to the roster of X apps that they already maintain, plus their spins for Mate, for XFC. It's a lot of work. I do hope that they succeed, that they have enough volunteers to handle all of that, and if you want to learn more about what I think about this, of course, my video is linked in the description. And we also will have the usual not so positive AI segment, because who could have guessed AI companies tend to do things fast and loose. This time it's Runway AI, who allegedly scraped thousands of YouTube videos, but also scraped movies that were pirated. A website named 404 Media managed to get their hands on spreadsheets containing lists of videos that Runway allegedly used to train their new model. This was also apparently confirmed from someone who says they worked for Runway. So maybe take this with a grain of salt, because that's a lot of apparently and allegedly. But this person said that the company created spreadsheets containing lists of videos that they absolutely wanted in their database. And then they just downloaded all of these videos using a proxy to stay off the radar. Now this could easily be dismissed as just hearsay, rumors, or personal attacks. But Runway's AI tool does spit out uncannily similar results to this unauthorized used content when typing prompts containing the names of some very popular YouTubers. And the previous model they had, not trained with this pirated content like their new model allegedly is, well, this older model just did not react well to this prompt and spat various generic unrelated videos compared to the quasi-clones the recent version of their model generates. Now this could still look pretty circumstantial, but I did run a few test prompts on Runway AI's Model 3, the alpha that they offer to anyone that you can test online right now if you want. I will display them on screen right now. I typed Marques Brownlee holding a smartphone with 3 cameras, and it spat out 2 persons with the right skin tone, one of them with the right haircut, and generally facial features that sort of resemble the ones from the host of the MKBHD channel. I also typed Linus from LTT dropping a computer, and while it didn't show me an exact replica of Linus, it did show me a white guy with a beard with the right haircut and the right facial shape. It didn't drop a computer, but it sort of looks a little bit like him. It's kind of baffling, and it clearly shows that this model actually knows who Marques Brownlee is, who Linus from LTT is, and at least used a few photos, very likely some videos, to train the model to actually recognize them. So it does lend a lot of credibility to these allegations that they did in fact use unauthorized content that is listed in the spreadsheet. But what can you expect? AI companies, they just don't care about your copyright attribution or whether something public means you can use it for free. And what you can use for free is this segue to our sponsor, to check out our sponsor's computers. That didn't make sense. It's Tuxedo Computers, you guessed it right, you probably know them by now. They make laptops and desktops and small form factor computers that run with Linux out of the box. And the reason why you would want that instead of buying something from Dell, Acer, Asus or whoever else is because the hardware they ship is actually tested to really support Linux well. They actually contribute patches upstream, and they have repos that contain all the patches that haven't been upstreamed yet, so you can be sure that any distro will run well on these computers. They have a big range, a lot of customization options for their desktops, the components, for their laptops, the keyboard layouts and everything else. And Tuxedo Computers is the only thing I use these days to run the channel, edit the videos, record the podcasts, and also for gaming. I have a dedicated desktop that comes from them, and that runs Nobara. So if you need a new computer, click the link in the description below and get yourself something from Tuxedo. They're really, really good. Okay, so thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. All the usual YouTube buttons are underneath the video. And if you really enjoyed the channel, there are links in the description that you can click to support me, to give me a little bit of money, and to get some cool perks as well. So, thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye.